I went on a date with my first trans man. It was fun. I didn't know he was trans from his profile, but, you know, in person I figured it out, but I didn't give a fuck. I'm too poor to have a phobia, okay? As long as you identify as a man who's paying this check. At the end of this motherfucking meal, because that's all I care about. As long as your pronouns are Zelle and Cash App, I don't give a fuck about what else you got going on. And it was a good date, you know what I'm saying? Conversation was good, the vibe was good. It went south when the bill came and his card declined. Right, I was like, ooh. And he's like, oh, don't worry, one of my 6 roommates are gonna send me some money. I was like, what the fuck, you live at jail, nigga? What the fuck? 6 roommates? So, long story short, he pays the bill. He says, Eva, I had a great time. I would love to take you out again. I said, absolutely the fuck not. He got offended. He's like, I thought we had a great time. Don't tell me you're transphobic. I said, no, baby, I don't date the poor. I'm poor. What the fuck we gonna do together? Wish upon a star, nigga? I need help. I said, first of all, that's poor planning on your end. Why didn't you transition into a rich man? Right? So your transactions can go through.
Good morning. It's Tuesday, Trump Tuesday, June the 11th, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Serenity Prayer and the patriotic song of the day, we will have the patriotic shorts, motivation, Bishop Barron, Ayn Rand, the 33 strategies of war, and Donald Trump. All that and more when I get back. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I should not change, the courage to change the things I should, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. Thank you. Now, Varney and Company with the headlines.
Picks it up now. Stu, take it away.
Good morning, Maria, and good morning, everyone. Apple rolls out its AI push, and Elon Musk doesn't like it. He threatens to ban Apple devices at his companies. He says integrating AI into Apple's operating system is an unacceptable security risk. Investors didn't think much of Apple's AI push. The stock went down. This morning, it's still well below $200 a share, and it's down about 8 cents at this point. Some selling on the rest of the market. Look at this. The Dow Industrials down maybe 150. NASDAQ down maybe 55 points. Interest rates, not much change. The 10-year coming in at 4.45% right now. The 2-year moving to 4.85%, down ever so slightly. As for Bitcoin, that's coming in this morning around $66,000 per coin. Oil, $77 a barrel or thereabouts, $77.91. Gas, you're looking at $3.44 for regular, no change there. Diesel is actually up 1 cent at $3.79. All right, politics. The president does it again. He seemed to freeze at an early celebration of Juneteenth. He had to be jolted into action by those around him. The pundits are again questioning how long he can stay in the job. Political commentator Nate Silver says it's risky for him to get out of the race and perhaps even more risky for him to stay in. Meanwhile, Biden is considering more action on the border. The New York Times says the administration may protect undocumented spouses of U.S. citizens from deportation and may allow them to work legally. That's 1 million people. On the show today, we'll take you to Hunter Biden's trial. Jury deliberations continue. A verdict is possible today. The elections in Europe. Voters not happy with immigration and environmentalism. Conservatives over there won big. There's a lesson here for Biden's presidential campaign over here. Violent anti-Israel demonstrations overnight. In New York, protesters celebrated the October 7th massacre of Jews. This in a city that's proud of trying to put Donald Trump in jail. Dearie me. It's Tuesday, June 11th, 2024. Varney and Company is about to begin.
And that was Stuart Varney with the headlines. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, Stuart Varney's My Take.
$67,000 a coin is actually down a couple of $1,000s. That's the markets on a Tuesday morning. Now this. Voters in Europe have had it with mass migration and environmental extremism. It's the same here. The polls show Americans are angry about our open border, and they're not real happy with Biden's Green New Deal either. These issues will be front and center in the presidential debates and the election on November the 5th. Control of the White House may shift because of these issues. Power has already shifted in Europe. 150 million voters across 27 countries turned out this past weekend, and the results were a real shock. Few expected the surge in anti-green and anti-immigration policies. In Germany, the Green Party lost half its seats. It received 3 million fewer votes than in 2019. No surprise, German industry has been crippled by environmental rules. Chancellor Olaf Scholz's party, he's the leader of the country. His party came in third. It was beaten by a party called Alternatives for Germany, which vigorously opposes mass migration. In France, Marine Le Pen's conservative National Rally Party took 30% of the vote. That's double the vote for President Macron's own party. National Rally is anti-immigration. They do not like their porous border. Macron was so shocked by this that he dissolved parliament and called a snap election. The 27 countries in the European Union have voted in a new parliament. It will lay down new rules on the environment and new rules on migration. Across the board, Europeans are signaling their frustration. Take note, President Biden, because they are frustrated by the same policies being pursued here. You know, it's strange to see the Europeans leading the way. They lag in just about everything else. But after years of crushing environmental rules and an invasion of migrants, they've seen the light. They are headed in a new direction. I think we are too. Second hour of Varney, just getting started.
And that was Stuart Varney's My Take. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, the Patriotic Shorts.
You can't shoot what you can't see, but cutting-edge anti-aircraft platforms like the Russian S-400 and S-500 have demonstrated that stealth may be advantageous, but speed may be more beneficial. Although with satellites you have no need to put aircraft in the area, they are not always the best option, as they can take up to 24 hours to enter the proper orbit, while an SR-71 can go from Los Angeles to Washington, D.C. in just over an hour, and now Lockheed Martin has a solution that is twice as fast as the SR-71. A hypersonic speed is way better than stealth, but could the already existing hypersonic missiles make the new bomber obsolete? Well, your answer is, it would be nearly impossible to stop a fast, high-flying bomber flying at the very edge of space, and armed with hypersonic missiles. The SR-72, unlike the SR-71, will be a hypersonic UAV for reconnaissance and surveillance. The SR-72 will be a powerful weapon for conducting accurate strikes against agile or otherwise difficult-to-reach targets, since the UAV will be equipped with hypersonic weaponry, like high-speed strike weapon.
Why aren't the Russians using better soldiers or equipment in Ukraine? Back in the 90s, I was part of an army unit that acted as an adversary against NATO. We used fake Russian equipment, but real Russian tactics. Russian offensive theory uses speed and maneuver to find a gap in enemy lines and exploit a breakthrough. And anyone who's been to Fort Irwin or Hohnsfelds knows what it's like to be on the receiving end of a Krasnovian attack. The Russians aren't intentionally throwing conscripts and old equipment into the meat grinder because
you go to war with the army you have, and not the army you might want or wish to have.
Using old equipment and conscripts as cannon fodder might waste some of your enemy's ammunition, but you're also giving them a lot of experience that your elite troops are going to have to deal with later. I don't think there's a Maskarovka here. I think they're just doing a bad job. Russian shortfalls in training, funding, and the incredible performance of smart anti-tank weapons and Turkish drones are making it really hard for Russia to make any gains. And the fighting spirit of the Ukrainian people makes things even harder.
My first mission was the Normandy invasion. Nothing I ever did exceeded that in importance and in overall what it meant in the total war picture as far as Europe was concerned. I think the one mission that I always look back on as the most important mission I had ever flew, because D-Day was so important, and it was the beginning of something that was so important. Very proud, very proud.
She went in and said, "Do you have a Colt 45? He said, "I sure do." And she said, "How much is it?" He said, $200. And she said, "Well, I can't afford that." He said, "How much do you have?" And she said, "I have only $75. And of course, he wasn't going to accept that. Well, she left the trailer house and was walking down the street, and that gunsmith come running down there to her and said, "Why do you want a pistol? That's a big pistol. Why do you want one that big and heavy?" He said, "Well, my son needs it. He's in the Marine Corps, and he needs a pistol." He said, "Come on, ma'am, I can do business with you." She went back, he cleaned up and gave it to her, and then she got on a bus to go to San Diego to bring me that pistol. It took her 36 hours to get from Odessa, Texas to San Diego.
If anybody gets shot, we went and picked them up. Not supposed to do that, but if we get a call that we've got somebody that's in dire straits, we need to get him out, we need to get him out. Try as we may, we didn't get them all back. To this day, that bothers me. I can still see people between my console. I watched a kid die. He no older than I was. We were supposed to be 100 knots max on this, what we were supposed to be doing, and I know damn well I was doing 110, 115, and I didn't make it. He glazed over on me, and I'm sitting there trying to tell him, I'm trying. And 50 years later, it still bothers me. I'll see him someday.
Why this bomb didn't explode is not what you think. The difference between this bomb and this one is one thing, and that's concrete. Inert bombs are loaded with concrete instead of explosives. They have the same size and handling characteristics as a regular bomb, except that they do not explode. But that doesn't mean they can't do damage. They still have a lot of kinetic energy. And since they're cheaper, safe to handle, and don't destroy the bombing range as much, inert bombs make for a great candidate for testing and training. But they can also be used in real combat. For example, to destroy military vehicles in an urban area.
Because compared to bombs that do explode, inert bombs can greatly minimize collateral damage and civilian casualties.
Jordan Peterson was destroying liberals even back in the day. Watch this.
And that was the Patriotic Shorts. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now a little bit of motivation.
Everyone says, well, you should be harmless, virtuous. You shouldn't do anyone any harm. You should sheath your competitive instinct. You shouldn't try to win. You know, you don't want to be too aggressive. You don't want to be too assertive. You want to take a back seat and all of that. It's like, no, wrong. You should be a monster, an absolute monster. And then you should learn how to control it.
It's impossible to respect yourself until you grow those mental teeth. And when you grow those teeth, you realize that you're dangerous.
You begin to demand success for yourself. You're no longer wishing or hoping things work out. You're going to make it happen no matter what. So you start carrying yourself with a different level of confidence and conviction that says to the world, I will not stop.
I am going to assess the situation. I am going to come up with a plan, and I am going to execute.
I'm going to go get it because I'm built for it. If you set out and you say you're going to do something, do yourself a favor and don't lie to yourself. That is the worst thing that an individual can ever do.
The people in life that win play offense, not defense. Stop backing into everything. Stand up. Bow your back a little bit. Start to walk a little different. Start to be that best version of you. You can do it in your quiet way. You can do it the way you do it. But somehow they got to look at you and go, okay, I won't monkey with that one.
I need you to put the type of effort forward that the world knows don't come from you.
You have to develop a doggedness. You got to have some toughness in you. And the only way to develop toughness is you got to practice being tough. And you cannot practice being tough by quitting every time you get tired, by stopping every time you don't feel like it, by giving up every time it gets challenged. That's what's wrong with people now. People don't make it because they always give up when it get hard. You know, it's so challenging now. You know, they was talking about me. I feel weak. I'm tired. Life don't give a damn about you being tired. You got to get about the business now. You want to be successful, you got to get at it. You got to stop all this soft shit and all that mess, man. You got to get at it. You got to tear their mouth out.
When you go out there, I need you to have that dog. When you get out there, I need you kill or be killed when you get out there. When you get out there, whatever you can get, go get it. Because they gonna get it before you get it. And they ain't gonna give it to you. So you go out there and get what's yours.
A true monster's mentality is when you're willing to forgo rest, forgo comfort, forgo personal desires, forgo whatever it takes to be better than you were yesterday. And every single time you feel like quitting, remember all those hours and days you sacrificed to get to where you are.
It's going to take you getting a hold of this thing and not letting go. You're going to have to fight and fight and fight till you can't fight anymore. Whatever it takes, I will do whatever I have to do to get to the other side, to make it over, to press through this. Nothing will hold me back. Nothing will stop me. If there's something that you want and you're hungry for it, you got to do whatever is necessary until. And when you give the best you can and that's not enough, you must do what is required. And don't give up on yourself. Don't throw the towel in so quickly. Many people give up on the 1-yard line. There will be things that will happen to you in life that will get you down. But you must always stand up inside yourself and know that you can handle this. You've got to stand up to it and say, I'm going to do this anyhow, and I'm not going to let you stop. And you've got to be so relentless that you're always looking for a way to get over, always looking for a way that you can break through, always looking for a way that you can win, always looking for a way that you can strike a telling blow. If you tell that thing, I'm here just like you here, and I promise you, I ain't leaving without the degree. I will not leave without that goal. I will not leave without that dream. I will not leave this university. I will not leave this job. I will not leave this client. I will not leave this opportunity until I'm successful. And you can't go back to that same old mindset. You gotta focus on this new day, this new mindset, these new goals. You can do it because that monster inside of you won't give up. That monster inside of you won't give in. That monster inside of you won't throw in the towel.
Failing doesn't mean you quit. It means you failed, but get back up and continue to push that bar higher and higher can set the bar so high that it's like, oh, I failed. That's where I need to be. Now I got to figure it out. You have to be uncommon amongst uncommon in your world. It takes everything. And then when you think you've given everything, you've just begun. In order to craft a life that you love more than the life you have today, you have to start being a little irrational. George Bernard Shaw said, reasonable people adapt themselves to the world. Unreasonable people attempt to adapt the world to themselves.
And that was a little bit of motivation. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now the Daily Dad for June the 11th.
June 11th. Make sure you make time for crazy. Douglas MacArthur was a man of routine. Most military men are. So it shouldn't surprise us that when his son Arthur was born, he built his family life around routine. But unlike far too many parents who make routine a form of control, MacArthur's morning routine began with a moment of joy. As William Manchester details in his book, American Caesar, it was a kind of scheduled, crazy fun. At about 7:30 a.m., the door of the general's bedroom would open, he writes, and the boy would trudge in, clutching his favorite toy. MacArthur would instantly bound out of bed and snap to attention. Then the general marched around the room in quick step while his son counted cadence. Boom, boom, boomity boom. And after they had passed the bed several times, the child would cover his eyes with his hands while MacArthur produced the day's present. A piece of candy, perhaps, or a crayon or a coloring book. And the ritual would end in the bathroom where MacArthur would shave while Arthur watched, and both sang duets. No one is too important or too busy to have some crazy time at home. No one is above getting pummeled by their kid in bed. No father should hesitate before singing at the top of his lungs while he shaves. These moments are the best moments. If they're rare, you're doing them wrong. They should be regular. They should be routine.
And that was The Daily Dad by Ryan Holiday for June the 11th. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now Bishop Robert Barron.
There's only one real sadness in life, not to be a saint. There's only one sadness. You say, oh gosh, I'm sad because I didn't achieve this goal. I didn't get the money I wanted, didn't get the career I wanted, didn't get the wife or husband I wanted. Well, okay, but those aren't real sadnesses. The only real sadness is not to be the person God wanted you to be. If you let that become the governing principle of your life, everything will change.
And that was Bishop Robert Barron. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, the Ayn Rand thought of the day. Quote, it is generally known that most universities now depend on government research projects as one of their major sources of income. The government grants to those senior researchers establish every recipient as an unofficially official power. It is his influence, his ideas, his theories, his preferences in faculty hiring that will come to dominate the school in a silent, unadmitted way. Unquote. And that was the Ayn Rand thought of the day. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, the 33 strategies of war.
Interpretation. For a samurai, losing a duel could mean death or public humiliation. Swordsmen sought out any advantage, physical dexterity, a superior sword, the perfect technique, to avoid that fate. But the greatest samurais, the Bokudens and Musashis, sought their advantage in being able to subtly push the opponent off his game, messing with his mind. They might try to make him self-conscious, a little too aware of his technique and style. A deadly trap for anyone who must react in the moment. They might trick him into focusing on the wrong thing, the left hand, the scarlet headband. Particularly with conventional-minded opponents, they might show up late, sparking a frustration that would upset their timing and concentration. In all of these cases, a change in the enemy's focus or mood would lead to a mistake. To try to repair this mistake in the heat of the moment would lead to another, until the one-upped fighter might literally walk into the other man's sword. Understand, what will yield the greatest effects in the game of one-upmanship is a subtle disturbance in your opponent's mood and mindset. Be too direct, make an insulting comment, an obvious threat, and you wake them to the danger you represent. Stir their competitive juices. Bring out the best in them. Instead, you want to bring out the worst. A subtle comment that makes them self-conscious and gets under their skin will turn them inward, get them lost in the labyrinth of their own thoughts. A seemingly innocent action that stirs an emotion like frustration, anger, or impatience will equally cloud their vision. In both cases, they will tend to misfire and start making mistakes. This works particularly well against rivals who must perform in some way. Deliver a speech, say, or present a project. The fixating thought or bad emotion you create in them makes them lose touch with the moment and messes up their timing. Do this right, too, and no one will be aware of your involvement in the bad performance, not even the rival you have one-upped.
And that was the 33 Strategies of War by Robert Greene. Back in a minute. Thank you. If you're a Democrat, you need to switch parties, become Republican, vote Republican, because everything the Democrats do backfires. For instance, pollution. The Democrats do things that guarantee that there's going to be an increase in pollution rather than a decrease in pollution. For instance, when they're doing road diets to make the roads smaller and narrower to get people out of their cars, instead what's happening is that all these cars and buses are taking longer to get to their destinations. The longer they spend on the road, the more they pollute. Think about it. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, Chapter 2 of Speechless, Controlling Words, Controlling Minds by Michael Knowles.
Chapter 2, Redefining Reality. The radical skepticism on which political correctness relies collapses under even the slightest scrutiny. Every freshman philosopher who ever declared, "There is no such thing as objective truth," must inevitably explain how he came to regard his own statement as objectively true. But logical rigor and consistency do not much matter when it comes to political correctness, which implicitly denies the possibility of both. Even taking this radical skepticism as just another well-intentioned lie, assuming, for example, that the politically correct know deep down that a man who believes himself to be a woman is not actually a woman, but they consider it good for that individual and for society to pretend that he is, means uncovering an even more radical premise at the heart of political correctness: the evil of truth and the goodness of lies. Traditionally, our society has frowned on lying. We have believed that the truth shall make you free. The politically correct invert this understanding. They believe that the truth about the man who thinks he's a woman will actively harm him. The truth about the baby will damage the mother who wants to rid herself of it. They consider the truth destructive and lies compassionate. For the politically correct, the lie that the man is a woman will free him from the shackles of biology. The lie that a baby isn't human or alive will free his mother from the undesired umbilical chain that imposes responsibility upon her. If language really does constitute reality, there isn't anything wrong with this sort of lying. If words can redefine reality, it isn't even lying at all. So ambitious a goal as redefining reality has required broadening the political realm beyond its usual bounds. Consider the example of handy-capable. Until the past half-century, politics was understood to concern public matters. Euphemisms for physical and mental handicaps would have fallen well outside the scope of politics. But political correctness blurs the distinction between the public and private spheres. Now, the personal is the political, as the feminists of the 1970s insisted. According to political correctness, nothing can be merely personal. Everything must become political, with one exception: politics. Ironically, while political correctness politicizes everything from household chores to running shoes, it constricts the traditional realm of electoral politics. According to the politically correct, we may, and indeed must, parse the public significance of seemingly trivial personal choices. But no one may dare question, much less put to a vote, a man's right to the ladies' room, which the new standards enshrine as a fundamental right beyond the realm of legitimate debate. What begins with semantic quibbles ends by refashioning the entire political order. Most historians of political correctness trace it to the early 1990s, when New York Magazine ran a front-page story on the phenomenon. Writers such as Dinesh D'Souza and Roger Kimball found PC flourishing in the campus debates of the 1980s and the battle over the Western canon. William Safire and leftist academic Ruth Perry traced it to the Chinese communist revolutionary Mao Zedong and his American acolytes in the 1960s. In fact, progressives' unnatural manipulation of language goes back further still. The spelling reformers of the early 20th century tried to hasten society's march toward progress by erasing inefficient flourishes and vestiges of tradition from language. The Esperantists of the late 19th century sought to break down barriers to global communication and identity through the contrivance of a universal second language, ironically just at the moment when the world's traditional universal second language, Latin, fell out of favor among progressives, who derided it as dead even before they had succeeded in killing it. Despite progressives' best efforts, Esperanto never caught on, and few today speak the unnaturally simplistic language. It should come as no surprise that one of the few people ever to speak Esperanto as a child is George Soros, the most infamous and influential leftist financier of our age. Political correctness has fared better at colonizing popular language, but people don't seem to like it any more than they did Esperanto. Polls conducted in 2015 by Fairleigh Dickinson University and the Pew Research Center found that most Americans count political correctness among the nation's most pressing problems. According to a study by scholars Stephen Hawkins, Daniel Yudkin, Miriam Juan Torres, and Tim Dixon, opponents of political correctness make up a silenced majority of Americans, comprising every race, age, and sex. Donald Trump relied on this group in his 2016 campaign. "I think the big problem this country has is being politically correct," Trump told moderator Megyn Kelly in August of 2015. "I've been challenged by so many people, and I don't, frankly, have time for total political correctness. And to be honest with you, this country doesn't have time either." America faced urgent problems, and Americans couldn't waste their breath on elaborately choreographed semantic distortions. Ironically, Trump's broadside against political correctness harkened back to the PC debates of the late 20th century, when both conservative accommodators and leftist critics argued that the battle over verbal hygiene, while perhaps a noble cause, distracted from more substantive debates over serious issues. Who cares if you call a poor black man black or African American when neither moniker will help him to escape generational poverty? That argument held sway in the 20th century when the aims of the campaign for political correctness seemed limited. But by the 21st century, political correctness seemed less a silly distraction than a significant threat to the political order. Even many leftists considered political correctness a waste of time in PC's early days. But that critique faded away as partisans across the political spectrum came to recognize the singular power of language to transform perception. One sees evidence of this power in leftists' perpetual invective against institutional racism, even as the left controls virtually every influential institution in the country: the mainstream media, Hollywood, administrative government, higher education, lower education, and big technology, among others. If institutional racism really threatened the justice and harmony of our republic, whose fault would that be? The left controls the institutions, and it wields them to enforce a rigid regime of politically correct speech that can destroy the reputations of any who dare to contradict it. A single unapproved word can cost a man his livelihood, and enforcement of this ideological orthodoxy begins long before he enters the workforce. According to a 2019 poll conducted by Echelon Insights for the center-right Young America's Foundation, nearly half of students aged 13 to 22 had stopped themselves from sharing their ideas or opinions in class discussions for fear of reprisal from the enforcers of political correctness. The students have every reason to fear punishment for contradicting leftist orthodoxy. During a lecture I gave for the Young America's Foundation in 2019 at California State University, Los Angeles, on the costs and dangers of illegal immigration, a professor declared that my very speech constituted violence against students and as such ought to be banned. Curiously, not once in her censorious diatribe did she acknowledge that the audience and I, through our tax dollars, paid the salary that enabled her own speech. For the politically correct, conservative speech is violence, and leftist violence is speech, a new standard that took center stage during the tumultuous spring of 2020. As the Chinese coronavirus led to the widespread curtailment of political and economic rights throughout the United States, some conservatives peaceably demonstrated for an end to the lockdowns. Leftist politicians, public health experts, and propagandists in the mainstream media castigated the pro-freedom protesters as super spreaders and even serial killers, accusing them of inflicting violence on their fellow citizens simply by breathing. Yet when the death of George Floyd sparked widespread riots, looting, and arson in 2020, those same politicians and propagandists excused the violent gatherings as speech not only protected by the First Amendment, but indispensable to containing the virus. White supremacy is a lethal public health issue that predates and contributes to COVID-19, read an open letter signed by over 1,200 public health experts. The self-styled experts implausibly celebrated leftist riots for curing the virus, even as they condemned peaceful conservative protests as dangerous to public health and, even worse by the light of the new standards, mostly white. The demagogues curtailed their opponents' freedom and invented new rights for themselves, not through the democratic process, but through the redefinition of words. Conservatives never seem to fight back. They can't even seem to keep up. Just as soon as they learn the newly coined term or definition, the jargon mutates again. The fate of the word retarded highlights conservatives' slow response to the semantic crusade. Sometime around the early 2000s, the radical wordsmiths banned the word retarded, which literally means slow, for the softer euphemism, mentally challenged, a term on its face no less offensive than the word it replaced, only different. The change seemed arbitrary, bound by its own logic to change again at the whims of the speech police. But this constant flux is a feature, not a bug, of political correctness. As the Claremont Institute's Angelo Codevilla explains, the point of PC is not and has never been merely about any of the items that it imposes, but about the imposition itself. For this reason, the British historian Paul Johnson defined political correctness as liberal fascism. Political correctness goes back much further than the people caught in its grip seem to understand. Most people trace the movement's origins to the popular culture of the 1990s, or the campus curriculum debates of the 1980s, or the radical revolts of the 1960s. No matter where people locate its origin, PC always seems new and aberrant, destined to collapse under the pressure of its own absurdity. In fact, political correctness goes back further still. It has not arisen through the delusions of leftist loons or the sensitivity of snowflakes. Political correctness is an insidious and influential political strategy developed by sophisticated thinkers and propagated over the course of a century by revolutionaries seeking to subvert our culture, as well as by dupes who know not what they do. Even the most conscious opponent of political correctness struggles to avoid its euphemisms, because the jargon shapes the society in which we move, and therefore the way in which we think. As a fish forgets the water in which he swims, so we fail to recognize the subtler effects of political correctness on our culture. Resistance against this hostile takeover of our language and culture will take more than haphazard polemics. It requires an accurate history of the movement and a coherent political philosophy to rebuff it, neither of which conservatives have managed to develop over the century since political correctness began. Jibes about triggered snowflakes followed by rote bumper sticker slogans exalting free speech, will not suffice to stem the revolutionary movement, which seeks to redefine reality and thereby transform the political order. Political correctness has always been a power grab. From PC's earliest days, its practitioners have cared about the meaning of words only as a means to an end. The question is how to be master. That's all.
And that was Chapter 2, Redefining Reality. And he's right about everything in here. The only thing he's missing is a solution. So I'm hoping that he's going to come up with the right answer to that later on in the book. So next time, Chapter 3. And that will be, let's see what we got for Chapter 3. Cultural Hegemony. And that's, again, Speechless by Michael Knowles. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now is Joe Rogan is interviewing Tulsi Gabbard. And I want you to hear, I may play all of it. It's about a 10-minute interview, but more than likely I'm going to end up cutting it short. But she makes a point that I've been making for quite some time. So here's Joe Rogan with Tulsi Gabbard.
The Joe Rogan Experience. This has been one of the most frustrating things that I've seen and experienced throughout my over 6 years in Congress that really started like when I first went up after I got elected. Where after every election happens, the new members of Congress, they go and they have what's called new member orientation, and they give you these books, and here's the maps, and here's where your office is, and all the administrative and logistical stuff. But very quickly, I would say within the first few days, where we first come in together as Democrats and Republicans, immediately, okay, Democrats go this way, Republicans go this way, immediately separated. And what we're told right off the bat is, look, this is about getting wins for our political party. And if you work with a Republican, then that's going to hurt the party, especially if you work with a Republican that the Democratic Party is trying to take out. Forget the substance of the idea. Forget the substance of the bill. And this happens on the opposite side as well. Republicans with Democrats, both political parties are guilty of this, where they're really putting the interests of the political party ahead of the people who just voted for us to go and serve them. And not just the Democrats who voted for me, but yes, the independents and the Republicans, both who voted for me or who didn't, but who I serve as part of my constituency. And I've continued to see this where, you'll have a bill that because it's a Democrat bill, Republicans will vote against it, substance aside, or a Republican bill, Democrats will vote against it just because it's a Republican bill. But then, hey, if they come in and, a month or a year later introduce the same bill or a similar bill, but now because it's a Democratic bill, okay, everybody, hey, let's go and support this legislation. You can imagine why there is so much gridlock in Washington, why nothing really gets done, and ultimately how this divisiveness and this hyperpartisanship is hurting the ability for the needs of the American people to be served.
When you talk... Okay, so we'll stop it right there. So she's bringing up the exact point I've been making, which is that we have two parties on Capitol Hill. Both are trying to get single-party rule, one-party rule. Each party hates the other, fears the other, is terrified that the other party, if in charge, is going to ruin the country, is going to destroy the country. And so what we end up with is a top-down system where, as she's described, nobody listens to the constituents. We, the constituents, are expected to listen to them. We're expected, because it's not just the representatives that show up there that are told what to do, and it's through the committee system, by the way, where that happens. You get onto a committee and or subcommittee, and whoever's the chairman of that committee or the ranking member will then tell you what it is you've got to do and whatnot. But now they're also telling the constituents what we have to do. We are expected to be to represent the party rather than the party representing us. And as I've said, the way to defeat this is through recruiting. I do it every day on my podcast, a little bit. I have a short 1-minute clip where I say to Democrats why they should vote Republican. And some of these are kind of weak, but it's to give Republicans and Democrats, for that matter, ideas. So you think and say, hey, that gives me an idea. I can go out and recruit my neighbors who are Democrats or Republicans. We have to get used to the idea that all issues are American issues. That's the first thing. Once we get our minds around that all issues, whether it's abortion or anything else, is an American issue, it's not a Democrat or Republican issue, then we can start recruiting each other. We can go to the Democrats and say, we're the party of civil rights, and explain to them why we're the party of civil rights. We're the party that cares about the environment. And we can make good, sound arguments as to why we're the party that cares more about the environment than the Democrats do. Okay, and what's going to happen once we start doing that? First of all, the parties can then no longer take votes for granted, and they can no longer afford to disregard certain voters. Once we get this dynamic started where both parties start trying to, if you will, poach voters from each other, then we have a situation where each party is now, all voters in the country are at play, so to speak, so that each party is now going to try to get every single voter in the country, and not just shore up their base and then maybe look to the independents, the left-leaning or right-leaning independents, to help put them over the top, right? And so they then take the Republican base for granted, and they write off Democrats. No. We need all voters to be in play. We need both parties to be actively pursuing and wooing all voters, Democrat, Republican, or Independent. When we start having that happening, then we have a truly a constitutional republic. Then the people are back in charge, and then we have representation again instead of leadership. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, a little Donald Trump.
My father was a worker, and he loved to work. He'd work on Saturdays. He'd work on Sundays. He just liked it. He'd go to church, but after church, he'd go and work. He just loved it, and I think more than anything else, not because of what he taught me lots of different things, but I watched him be a happy man and work until he was like literally 93. He was 93 years old when he died. So I have a lot of friends, they take vacations for 6 weeks and 8 weeks and 3 months, and they're never happy. So I watched my father, so I like to work. You have some kids that aren't so smart that work very hard that do very well. I mean, I've seen it many times. You know, I was blessed to have smart children. They did well in school, they got good marks, they didn't have problems. But a lot of that was early upbringing. I'd always say to them, no drugs, no alcohol, no cigarettes. I'd just drive them crazy. I'd say every time they'd leave, no drugs, no alcohol, no cigarettes. Repeat after me. But I'd drum it into their heads. And, you know, you have to get through those artificial barriers. I call them artificial barriers because you can do something about it until it's too late. Once it's in your system, it's very hard to stop. Like, I don't drink, and it's very easy for me not to drink. I tell people, what are you drinking for? What are you drinking for? I had a brother, Fred, who was sadly an alcoholic, a serious alcoholic. He was much older. He was 10 years older than me, 11 years older than me, and he was as good-looking a guy as you've ever seen. He had everything going, the best personality. I have like a bad personality compared to Fred, but he started drinking, and he also smoked a lot. I think it started in college, frankly, but it got progressively worse. And he was really unable to stop, and he'd always tell me, don't you ever drink, and don't you ever smoke. He'd add the smoke in it because he smoked and he drank. And hugely affected his health and hugely affected even his look. So I never drank. I mean, I really, when you talk about my father, I learned a lot from my father, but I learned a lot from my brother Fred. And he set an example. It wasn't maybe the example that people would think, but it really was, in its own way, an example. I've spent my entire life in business looking at the untapped potential in projects and in people all over the world. And I didn't like seeing that. Spectacular people, sometimes underappreciated, unfortunately, but we appreciate them. We know what they go through. People I know that are really tough and really smart, and right now that's what we need. We need toughness. We need this, we need the brain power, and we need toughness. That's a tremendously powerful weapon if they knew how to use it. They really do have a tremendously powerful weapon, but they don't use it, and they don't use it properly. They are terrible negotiators. I think right now what people want is they want competence. They're tired of other things. That's very important to people now. We must always remember that we share one home and one glorious destiny. Whether we are brown, black, or white, and we are all made by the same Almighty God. I say it is time for us to come together as one united people. As long as you have pride in your beliefs, courage in your convictions, and faith in your God, then you will not fail. You're going to go out, you're going to do whatever you're going to do. Some are going to make a lot of money. Some are going to be even happier doing other things. No dream is too big. No challenge is too great. Nothing we want for our future is beyond our reach. You will build a future where we have the courage to chase our dreams no matter what the cynics and the doubters have to say. You will have the confidence to speak the hopes in your hearts and to express the love that stirs your souls. No one is ever going to stop you from practicing your faith or from preaching what's in your heart. In your hearts are inscribed the values of service, sacrifice, and devotion. Now you must go forth into the world and turn your hopes and dreams into action. I know that each of you will do what is right, not what is the easy way, and that you will be true to yourself and your country and your beliefs. I'm blessed with a great memory, but it's very interesting. When I speak in front of large crowds, if you are reading a speech, it's much easier, but you don't get the reaction. If you're reading, or if you have teleprompters, if you have a teleprompter or in any way reading a speech or even looking down all the time at notes, you're not going to get the reaction from the crowd. So I go out and I really, it's a riskier proposition because when you read, you're not going to make any mistake. Now, I know what I'm going to say, but it's a riskier thing. But it's a much better, when you get it right, it's a thing of beauty. If I give you one message to hold in your hearts today, it's this: never, ever give up. There'll be times in your life you'll want to quit, you'll want to go home. I've seen so many brilliant people. They gave up in life. They were totally brilliant. They were top of their class. They were the best students. I've seen others who really didn't have that talent or that ability, and they're among the most successful people today in the world because they never quit and they never gave up. So just remember that. Never stop fighting and dream big and bold and daring. We have to do that. Carry yourself with dignity and pride. Demand the best from yourself and be totally unafraid to challenge entrenched interests and failed power structures. And always have the courage to be yourself. Most importantly, you have to do what you love. You have to do what you love. I've seen so many people, they're forced through lots of reasons to go down a path that leads them to something that they don't love, that they don't enjoy. You have to do what you love, or you most likely won't be very successful at it. You do what you do. I mean, it is what it is. you've learned and you're an intelligent person. You have to understand that about yourself. Otherwise, you're not going to be very good up there. And
when your story goes from here, it will be defined by your vision, your perseverance, and your grit. Just think for a moment of how blessed you are, surrounded by people who you love and care about so much. Then ask yourself, with all of those blessings and all of the blessings that you've been given, what imprint will you leave in the sands of history? Following your convictions means you must be willing to face criticism from those who lack the same courage to do what is right. A small group of failed voices who think they know everything and understand everyone want to tell everybody else how to live and what to do and how to think. But you aren't going to let other people tell you what you believe. But the fact is, no one has ever achieved anything significant without a chorus of critics standing on the sidelines explaining why it can't be done. Nothing is easier or more pathetic than being a critic. But the future belongs to the dreamers, not to the critics. The future belongs to the people who follow their heart no matter what the critics say, because they truly believe in their vision. Being an outsider is fine. Embrace the label, because it's the outsiders who change the world and who make a real and lasting difference. The more that a broken system tells you that you're wrong, the more certain you should be that you must keep pushing ahead. So, there's a certain energy you have to get. You have to build up the energy. It's called the road less traveled. I know that each of you will be a warrior for the truth. Each of you should take immense pride in what you have achieved. The story of America is the story of an adventure that began with deep faith, big dreams, and humble beginnings. Did we take risks? Did we dare to defy expectations? Did we challenge accepted wisdom and take on established systems? Or did we just go along with convention, swim downstream so easily with the current, and just give in because it was the easy way, it was the traditional way, or it was the accepted way?
And that was Donald Trump. Back in a minute. Thank you. The following is one of my voiceover demos. If you're a voiceover artist and you would like to advertise one of your demos on my podcast, please send an MP3 to thedrill12, all one word, at gmail.com. That's thedrill12 at gmail.com. Back in a minute.
Americans love scenery. We want to see it all, from one coast to the next, Mount Rushmore down to the Everglades. So hop into a Chevy Malibu and take the scenic route. It's the car you knew America could build. There's a place where people count on friendships they can trace back generations, where they can count on the same stool at the coffee shop waiting for them every morning. This place is called Glen Ellen, and you can find it in every bottle of Glen Ellen wine. This is craft brewed Herman Joseph's, the smoothest, easiest drinking specialty beer in the entire solar system. And I believe you'll find drinkable in the dictionary right after don't order a beer you can't drink. Zoingo! Boingo! The freestyle pogo with more boing, more bounce. Bounce further, bounce higher with Zoingo Boingo. To see what makes Arrowhead Mountain Spring water different from those other waters, you have to go back to the source. And with Arrowhead, that means going back a little farther and longer than most. Between security challenged and security strengthened, there's one important word: how. And it is the how that makes all the difference to our nation and our world. Lockheed Martin. We never forget who we're working for. What makes Kraft Singles so good? 2 out of every 3 kids don't get the recommended amount of calcium. But with Kraft Singles, they get a good source of calcium and the taste they love. Kraft Singles. Magic every single time. Throw boring overboard with a new real meal from Long John Silver's. A meal worthy of a plate, just $4.99. Only at Long John Silver's. We may not all be geniuses, but we can all do something smart. Introducing the Hyundai 199 Sonata lease. It's a smart deal on a really smart car.
This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there, and reminding you that you are not neutral and that the government has no rights.